I'd like to invite Whitaker to give apologies for absence.
Good afternoon, everybody. Nice to see so many of you. Sorry we're online, unfortunately for reasons pertaining to the general election, but we'll be back in our usual place in November. We have 6 apologies today. Ben Gleeson, Joanna Goodall, Keith Dibble, Anne-Marie Baker, and we have an alternate for Anne-Marie standing in today, Gareth Saunders and George Hess. And again, there's an alternate for George also. That's us today.
Okay, thanks, Whitaker. I think also there are some new members. So could you just mention who they are, Whitaker?
Yeah. We have new representation from Rushmore. I know that Keith Dibble was, I think, at the last meeting, but he's officially on board now. Keith and his colleague, Craig Card, are the new representatives from Rushmore. We also have Gareth Ives from Crondall Parish Council, who's recently been appointed. And we, in the users group, we have a switch. Lister Aviation have popped out, and John Wakely from Dassault Aviation returns to the committee.
See, there are a few hands there too.
Okay, so welcome to those new members.
Some hands. Any questions?
Some hands going up already?
Yeah, so I think there was Jules and Crystal. Second, Jules and Crystal.
Jules,
yeah, there is. Sorry, Jules. Yeah, Jules, you've got a question. Sorry.
No, sorry, it's an apology. I thought I was going to be here. I was going to be here for the whole thing, but I've got to leave at about 3:15. So apologies for that, but I'll be ducking out then.
Thank you for letting us know.
Okay. Any more points?
Chris?
Yes.
Crystal.
Thank you. I just popped my hand up. Say, everybody who's not speaking, can I suggest they mute their microphones? Otherwise, we do tend to have a problem with these Teams meetings, and it's always worth mentioning at the start of the meeting.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, is that?
I can mute all if you prefer.
Sorry?
I can mute all.
Yeah.
Marlon's got his hand up.
Hi, Marlon.
Yeah, good afternoon. Sorry, just similar. I have to leave just before 4 o'clock, if I may, so my apologies for that, but I can be with you till then.
Okay. Thanks very much, Marlon. No other hands up. So shall we move to the agenda and the minutes of the last meeting, which have been circulated and comments have been received. So hopefully we can approve those minutes. Does anybody want to make any last minute changes? Otherwise, we'll approve the minutes. Right. Shall we now go to the actions from, actions are there.
Sorry. Yeah.
So the actions from the minutes, all of which I think have been discharged. But the first action was Jenny and Gareth Andrews to revisit the complaints, the format of the complaints. This has been gone through several times, and I think the conclusion is that we can't take any further action. We can't get the additional detail that's been requested for GDPR reasons. So I think that matter is closed now. I think it has been gone into, but we can't go further with it. The second action was Jenny and Mark Sanderson to talk about junior schools and primary schools visits. I think if you see from the papers, there have been some visits.
Yes.
Some schools have already visited, and I think the airport's position is that they're always very willing to host visits from local schools. So if anybody would like to propose a school to come and have a look at the at Farnborough, please get in touch with Mark Sanderson, and I'm sure he can arrange it. Succession plan is the next item, and
that was really asking members to suggest possible candidates.
Okay, so yes, we have had some suggestions, and we've gone through this process now, so I'll be talking about that later. next item is the selection committee, which was appointed at the last meeting, and the selection committee has now conducted the interviews, and I'll be reporting on that very shortly. Gareth was to circulate details of WebTrack. I think Gareth has done that, so that action is discharged. Jeff to provide this inspector's report. I think, Jeff, you did that, so that has also been dealt with. Action 8 was the circulation of the Church Village noise report, which is now available, has been considered by the noise committee, and there will be a discussion of that, and the report itself will be circulated. But we'll have a word about that later in the meeting. So I think that discharges all the actions.
Jeff has his hand.
Jeff has got his hand.
Yes, I've been trying to put my hand up, Philip.
Sorry, Jeff. Yeah.
My action 7 was closed, but I think it passes to Richard Ward to carry that action on. He says he cannot do it at the moment because of the current planning application.
Okay. Well, I don't know whether Richard's on the meeting, but
Richard is available. He's
well,
on there some.
let's say that the Rushmore representative on the FACC takes on board the outstanding item on this.
Yeah. Okay. Well, if I could ask the Rushmore, there's more than one, I think, representatives to follow up on that.
Yeah.
We'll certainly do that. Okay.
Okay.
Thanks very much, Jeff. On to item 3. As I mentioned at the last meeting, I'm sure to retire from the committee, and there has been a process to select a new chairman. The committee members were represented. David Munro chaired that committee, and the candidates were interviewed 2 or 3 weeks ago, and as a result of that, it has been recommended that my replacement is Colin Flack. Colin Flack is very well versed in airport consultative committees. He's currently chairman of the Birmingham Committee. He's also chairman of the UK Association of Airport Consultative Committees. So I think I feel he would be an excellent choice for chairman. He's very well experienced, and he's very familiar with running meetings, and he's familiar with the issues that we have to deal with at these committees. So Colin Flack will be the chairman from the next meeting in November. If Colin is on the line, I'm not sure he is actually, I think he's travelling, but anyway, I'd like to welcome Colin on your behalf, and I'm sure that Colin will serve the committee well. Moving on now to, I want to slightly amend the order here, but item 8 is a report from Sophie Rogers of Rushmore on the Environmental Fund, and if Sophie is available, we would like to deal with that item now. So, Sophie, are you online?
I am.
Yes, you are. Yes. Okay, Sophie. So, could you give us an update then on the Environmental Fund?
Yes. Let me just share my screen with you. Bear with me. Oh, it's being a bit slow. Is that? There we go. Can you see that?
Yeah.
Brilliant. So I'm Sophie. I'm the Climate Change Officer at Rushmore Borough Council. I've recently taken over from Alison Nichols, who you may have had present to you previously. She's taken early retirement this year. Not early retirement. She's taken retirement earlier this year. So I've taken over from her. And I hope that I can be as seamless as she was with the administration of this fund. So just a quick overview of what I'm going to present on this afternoon. So I'm going to give a bit of a background of the fund for any of those who may not be aware of the background, the criteria, the process of the application, the awards that have been awarded in the past year, and then any ongoing promotion that we've been doing around the fund. So in 2000, as part of the planning permissions for business flying, this included a clause that established a fund for local environmental improvement projects. In 2001, contributions commenced. So this is £2 per aircraft movement and then £5 for larger aircraft movements. In 2009, a grant process was established. So before 2009, there was just select projects, to my understanding, that were funded through the fund. Then in 2009, there was this set criteria was put in place that applications had to fulfil to be granted funding. This used to be approved by Cabinet, so that would have happened 3 or 4 times a year. Currently, from about 2020, I believe, so before I started, this was then moved to being approved by portfolio holder. This was community. It's now approved by our portfolio holder for community and residents. And I will go into the process in just shortly in a bit more detail on that. But this transition from it being approved by Cabinet to being approved by portfolio holder meant that it could be that applications could be looked at more regularly. So at the moment, they're looked at on a monthly basis, as opposed to that 3 or 4 times a year. So since 2010, 142 grants have been awarded and over £800,000 worth of funding has been given to community projects. So far this year, we're continuing to promote the fund, and so far 7 grants have been awarded, totalling just over £41,000. So hopefully that gave you a bit of a whirlwind background of the history of the fund. So in terms of the criteria, projects need to be located within 5 kilometres of the centre of the airport. I do apologise if the map is a little bit small on this, but the dot in the middle of the map on the side, that's the centre of Farnborough Airport. The purple border is Rushmore District, and then the red radius, anything within there is eligible for funding. So this is 5 kilometres or 3 miles. So this covers not only most of Rushmore, but also parts of Hart, Surrey Heath and Waverley. So kind of around Ashvale, Mitchett, parts of Frimley Green, in Waverley, Heath End, Weybourne, and then Hart, some areas of Fleet, Church Crookham and the surrounding areas are covered as well. So other criteria that applications need to fulfil is to be demonstrably and regularly affected by aircraft. They need to have public access, so to be enjoyed by the wider community, and to demonstrate an environmental improvement. So this can include, but not limited to, planting, reducing carbon, or demonstrating climate action. As you'll see a little bit later, there is a real wide variety of things that are funded through this, so it's really great that we're getting a lot of variation in the applications that are coming through more recently. So who can apply? So charitable organisations and community groups, they need to be a properly constituted not-for-profit organisation or group. They must have their own bank account, and if they're working with young people or vulnerable adults, they must also have a safeguarding policy, and we do request this as part of the application process when they're submitting an application. So we ask organisations to submit an application to our community development inbox. The application form is available on our website, which I have given at the end. And this is all the applications are then checked against the set criteria. These are then taken to a panel which meet monthly. This includes our portfolio holder for community and residents, the service manager for community and myself, but ultimately all decisions are made by the community and residents portfolio holder at Rushmore Borough Council. After the decisions are made, a record of executive decision is then published. This is published on our website and also sent to members. We then allow a 5 working day call-in period, After that, decision letters are sent to the applicants, and then they can start on their projects. So feedback, we request a feedback report, usually within 6 months. We try to advise to send back a feedback report. Sometimes this might be a bit later, dependent on how long the project will last. This is then all collated into an annual report every year, which is then circulated to Farnborough Airport and the FACC. So hopefully you should have got one a couple of months ago for 2023. So this is just the past year awards. So last year, like I previously said, just under £81,000 was awarded to 10 applications. This slightly dipped in 21-22 during COVID. Alison did note that there was a drop in applications, which you would imagine, but it's really promising. And so far, like I say, we've awarded 7 awards and 41,000, and we're just under halfway through the year. So we are getting a lot more applications recently, and it's really, really positive. So in terms of areas benefiting from awards, the majority of them do come from within Rushmore, but we do get them from the surrounding areas, and Alison's done a really good job, which I've tried to carry on, of really trying to promote it to the districts and groups within the districts around Rushmore as well. So this is just all the awards for last year. So as you can see, the variety here, we've got the Source Young People's Charity included Bikes for Good projects. This was refurbished bikes for vulnerable people. So I think they gave 48 vulnerable people bikes for active travel, and they were all refurbished from donations. The Species Recovery Trust, this was a Marsh Club Moss reintroduction in Heathlands, corporate volunteer days, Action Planet Immersive Learning, that's the head-to-head theatre one there. That was a theatre production and then an immersive learning experience to get people excited about getting into nature and to protect the environment. And then urban tree planting, outdoor food sanctuaries. So there is a wide variety of things that are being funded. And these are some completed projects from 2002 to 2003. So there's the Species Recovery Trust Club Moss, there's a picture of one. Tysis Meadow, there was some tern rafts. So tern rafts are a key species, and they luckily get them at Tysis Meadow. So that was really, we had some good feedback from residents about being able to get up close to these seabird colonies, inland. So that was really, really positive there. We've got the Mayfield Community Partnerships. That was for the Hawley Autumn Festival. And you see the Source, what I talked about, the bike refurbishment there. So ongoing promotion. So like I said, Alison was really positive and really did a lot of work around promotion of this, which I've carried on from her. So engaging with local authorities, so they can promote that to their community groups that they know of. Whilst councils can't apply themselves, they have a lot of links with community groups and organisations. We've gone out to community and green groups that we know of, that we have contact with, to let them know that there's funds available. The same with country parks and nature reserves. We've done the same with those. It goes out to our Rushmore Councillor newsletter. That's a weekly newsletter. When funds come in to us at the beginning of the year, we let them know to promote that where they can. It's gone out in our Arena magazine. So the last one was in 2022. We are planning on doing another one this year. So that's our local magazine that goes out to all residents in Rushmore. It's also been put in our Hart and Rushmore Sporting Families newsletter. This goes out a bit more regularly, and is usually included in quite a few of those. We also try to promote it to Rushmore Voluntary Services. So that's our voluntary service in Rushmore. They have just started a Green Community Forum as well, so it's really positive that they can push that out to their local green spaces and groups that function within them. And obviously all the information is on our website as well. So there is currently £58,681 available for funding. There is no limit to the amount that can be applied for. However, value is looked at as part of the funding process. And yeah, that was an overview of an update from the Environmental Fund. That is the website, so feel free to go onto there. All of the application, all the criteria and eligibility and all the information that I've just described is on there, as well as information on what's been funded in the past. Is on there as well. But if you've got any more specific questions or anything in the future, my contact details on there as well. But I welcome any questions that you've got now.
Thank you very much, Sophie. That's very useful for us. Has anybody got any questions they'd like to put at this point? I think Jeff Marks has got a question.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the limitation of 5 kilometres, is that reasonable? Should that be expanded, given that noise is impacting communities beyond that radius?
So it's my understanding, you appreciate that I have only taken this fund over fairly recently, but my understanding is when this was put in place, the inclusion of the grants was put because of the impact of the development on the site of nature conservation, so on the sink. So I think that 5 kilometre radius and the proximity was important for that when that radius was put in place.
Yeah, thank you, Sophie. I think it's a question for the committee as opposed to you.
Okay, thanks, Jeff. Jules, you have a question?
I think Jeff wants an answer.
He wants an answer now. Well,
I was going to give him an answer actually, if I may. I was going to. That's what I was going to say. It wasn't so much a question as a comment. There is going to be some consultation on the criteria for the Environmental Fund, and that's going to incorporate obviously all the stakeholders that are involved in that process. But it's one of the first things that was discussed by the portfolio holder and the cabinet that the criteria could be looked at and revisited.
Good,
from
thank you.
Rushmore's perspective.
And is that irrespective of the planning application?
It's got nothing to do with the planning application, unless that becomes a pertinent point. That's just in the pipeline anyway.
Okay. Any other questions?
Yeah, I've got one. I think Jules may have given me a way of this could get answered, but really to Sophie, as a district councillor in Hart, whose ward would benefit from this fund, is there any way that I could be made aware of those groups which are applying for funding so that I can help and guide them with their application? Because although we're a smaller area included in that circle than Rushmore, there is quite a clear disparity about the number of grants that go to Rushmore versus going to Hart, Waverley and Surrey Heath. And I notice you're sending out information to all your Rushmore members. If Hart members were involved as well, then we could give our organisations the same encouragement that I'm sure the Rushmore organisations are getting. That was diplomatically phrased.
So I have no problem in sending you all the same information that I've sent. I did send it to Hart district officers. And it's just a case of me not having contact details for members from other districts, but I'm more than happy to send you over all the information as well. And perhaps if Hart district have a similar newsletter, I'm more than happy to provide information to put on that to send out to members from other districts.
Brilliant. I'll sort a connection out with you, Sophie, to the right people.
No problem. Feel free. Yeah, send me over something, and I'm more than happy to send out that. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, any more questions for Sophie?
Yes, there was. Sorry, Philip, I don't know which mode you're displaying in the meeting room there, but if you call up the people part of Teams, it'll drop you a little list on the right-hand side of the screen, and then you'll see. are all of us queuing up nicely, because it does sort the hands out in the order they arrive.
Not controlling the technology.
Well, whoever's in charge there. Anyway, two questions for Sophie. I very much support what Councillor Radley was saying, and I'm the other Hart member, so you'll see our details in the meeting invite, but always happy to provide them more obviously if that helps. This point about the area that's affected, I think Jeff's touched on it, and Jules as well. To my mind, a 5 kilometre circle centred on the airport is a purely arbitrary and bureaucratic way of trying to distribute these funds. If you look at the people who are affected by these things, it is significantly extended along the line of the runway. And so I would suggest that there needs to be some reconsideration of that. So instead of a circle, perhaps an ellipse that stretches out much further along those lines. And if Jules, in her councillor role as Councillor Crossley, can perhaps inform us as to when this consultation is occurring, that would be very useful, because I think there's several things to put into that in terms of trying to make it more accessible to those that are more affected by the aircraft at the airport. And so that's probably more of a statement, but at least it sounds like you're all open to the idea of adjusting it, which I think is a good idea. Secondly, in terms of the funds that are awarded, how much competition are you getting? You've listed the ones that you've awarded. Is that 100% of those that apply, 50%, 10%, 1%?
No, so just on that last point. So I would say, so for example, this year we've had, so far in 2024, we've awarded 7 grants. 3 have been unsuccessful in that, and they are listed on the record of executive decisions as well. So when it lists what has been awarded and for what, at the bottom it does show unsuccessful awards. These are usually because they don't fulfill the criteria. So for example, not having public access or involving the wider community, usually they're unsuccessful on the most part because they don't demonstrate an environmental improvement, which is a key part of the criteria. So that's usually why they're unsuccessful. But on the most part, I would say probably about 80% of them. I can look at that. 70 to 80%.
No, it's just, only it is a rough guide really, because it just gives a sense of, if you're putting a lot of effort into marketing this across the areas and you're not getting a lot of replies back, and as Councillor Radley mentioned, maybe there's ways we can help and improve that to get you better applications. But particularly for me, being in a village called Crundle, which is just outside your line, it would be better if it was a slightly nicer shape. But I see Jules has also got her hand up, and I suspect she wants to reply to the consultation point.
Just if you don't mind, if I can, just say that we are getting a lot more applications, even in the short time that I've been here, and I did work with Alison a little bit before she left. There are more applications that are coming in. It's been really, really positive. We would just like, and she'd started doing a lot more, trying to push it out, because we do want more applications from the surrounding areas, not just within Rushmore. But we are getting a lot more applications. We've got 2 already in the pipeline that are going to be looked at next month. So we are getting a steady flow of applications. That's really positive.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, the only other hand I can see, but forgive me if I'm missing other people, is Jules Crossley again.
Hi, yes, thank you. Just to say that the portfolio holder for this, who is ultimately the decision maker, if you like, is Sophie Porter. So if people want to email her with their views, I think that would probably be really useful. Sophie, spelled ie.porter@rushmore.gov.uk. Then I think she'd be really happy to hear about people's views. I would say that the distance from the airport has been viewed in a very sort of, it hasn't been adhered to in a very strict sense. If somebody's applied and they're just you know, a little bit outside that radius, then that hasn't been a reason why they've been turned down. The environmental benefit has been much more of an important thing. Also, if somebody could enable the chat function, things like that could be put in the chat, and it would save a lot of time. There's no chat function at the moment. Thank you.
Good point.
Okay, any other questions?
Dan, can you see the list of people?
There's no other questions.
I don't think there are any other questions. So can I just thank you, Sophie, for your presentation. And I'm sure that you'll be receiving a lot more applications now. Hopefully you will.
Thank you.
Okay. Shall we move on to the next item then, which is the update from Simon Gear.
Thank you, Chair. And Sophie, that was an excellent presentation, by the way. It came across really well. And it would be remiss of me not to say that actually we're looking to quadruple the amount of funds available for environmental and societal wellbeing projects should the planning application be successful. So that should hopefully we can all work together in terms of how we allocate that money and where it goes to. So I'll be very brief on my CEO report. Traffic is holding up reasonably well at the airport year to date to May, although we are slightly behind where we were last year. We're about 3% lower in terms of the number of flights compared to the same period last year. Interestingly enough, our weekend traffic is around about 4.5% below where it was last year. So actually, our weekdays have held up slightly better than our weekends. Aircraft weight, we reported on this trend at the last meeting. It's continuing, so we are seeing a significant increase in aircraft over 50 tons. And as we reported last time, this is as a result of the Global 7500 aircraft, which is about 52 tons. And it's new to the Vista fleet. It came into operation in 2019, and I think they have about 18 of these aircraft in their fleet, and they're a lot quieter and more fuel efficient than the aircraft they're replacing. So that's a continuing trend we're likely to see here at Farnborough. Our market share remains relatively stable year on year. Of the contestable market, we're at about 31%. And our weekend mix, so the amount of flying that happens at the weekend versus the rest of the week for the period up till May was 28%, and that compares to 29% for the first 5 months last year. So that's logical if actually weekend traffic is performing slightly worse than weekday traffic as it is. In terms of investment, we're continuing to obviously invest in our facilities. Domus 3 or Hangar 3 is now fully operational. And we also completed the installation of our new 3 million security upgrade project. So this is where we've introduced new CT security technology for passenger security processing, which means that passengers don't need to remove liquids and laptops from their bags when they pass through Farnborough Airport. Installation work is continuing on our solar project, which is one of the largest lightweight solar installations in the southeast. Solar panels are now mounted on the curved roofs of the hangar. That's there. Scaffolding's still up, but the solar panels are in situ. And we're currently putting solar panels onto the terminal building roof. And this will power 25% of the airport's power needs going into the future. We had a request from the committee, I think it was last time, to notify members if there'd been any planning applications made by the airport, and I can confirm that no new planning applications have been submitted between the last meeting and this meeting. In April, we were delighted to win a couple more awards, always worth noting the accolades. So we were named Europe's #1 FBO in Europe in the Professional Pilot Survey 2024. And also, actually, most notably, the Aviator Hampshire Hotel was named one of the top 2 leading hotels in the UK by TripAdvisor's Traveller's Choice Best of the Best Hotel Awards. So the second best hotel in the UK is in our borough, and it's the Aviator Hampshire Hotel. So we're very proud of that. We've also been recognised once again as one of the UK's top 100 great places to work, which fits as our strategy, as part of our strategy to be a employer of responsibility and choice within the local area. And these awards follow the 2 awards we reported to the committee previously, which was the #1 business aviation airport outside of the Americas, and the best FBO award at the Air Charter Association. So things are going well in terms of recognition. In terms of community engagement, Mark and the team have been busy. We were headline sponsors at the Aldershot hosted match between England Sea and Nepal, which was a great experience and one that we very much enjoyed being part of. And we've undertaken a number of school visits, which I think are itemised in the report. But equally as important, we're starting to roll out our Know Your Airport community engagement sessions. And we've welcomed 5 community groups over the last 6 community groups over the last few months to our new Nexus Hub, where we've undertaken some presentations and tours of the airport. So there are a couple of other major updates, pertinent updates that are coming up on planning, airspace and air show, but they're later on in the agenda. So that completes my update. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Simon. Any questions for Simon on his report? Nobody's putting their hands up. Okay, we'll move on then to the information reports which have been circulated, and there is the complaints by postcode, the complaints summary, and then we'll go on to a possible new form of complaints report. So has anybody got any questions on the complaints report itself? No. It's noticeable that there are 2 postcodes that get are particularly prominent, and that reflects the number of complaints from, I think it said in the papers, 2 or 3 individuals. So it's not really a very wide spectrum of people. Okay, shall we look at the proposed new complaints report? Oh, sorry, Chris Dorney.
Sorry, yeah. I was just letting you talk about the postcode bit, and then just looking at the other part of the complaints report, where there's somewhere that is a set that's unrelated to FAL. Now, some of them I can see, Uxbridge, I would very much accept was very much unrelated to Farnborough. But I suspect some of the ones to do with out-of-hours aircraft and low-flying aircraft are probably the RAF Odium has a visiting aircraft that does some certification work with their approach system, and they often post up on the Odium page to say it'll be flying over these particular nights, and certainly obviously where I am on the approach to Odium, we hear it buzzing around quite often, and it may just be helpful to make everyone aware that that is the case, and sometimes rather than say it's just not your problem, just say actually it's that RAF Odium, or sorry, RAF certification flight that occurs on various occasions.
Okay, I'll just comment, as I live in Odium, there is a lot of night flying at the moment, and the reason for that is that the pilots have got to train at night, and you know we've got very long days.
Indeed.
I think the next question was from Jenny Bradley.
Thank you very much. Just to point out, again on the postcode summary table, GU52 is actually primarily Church Crookham, please. GU51 is Fleet at the bottom there. So I'm glad to see this reflects more sensibly about who's complaining from which area. Church Crookham is far more effective than Fleet since the airspace change. So this is a better reminder, but those postcodes make a difference to me to be able to pick up which complaints are going wrong. I do notice on the complaints list that unusually we've actually got a complaint from both Fleet and Church Crookham for the same flights on the 7th of May in the complaints report. One is at about midday, and another was at about 12:41, 42. I am interested to know why, if I'm able to follow up with Gareth maybe after the meeting rather than go into detail here. But these are some of the issues that actually I'm really keen to make sure we pick up on and can understand and explain to residents if we get any follow-up. So thank you for that.
Yeah, that's fine, Jenny. We'll pick it up after the meeting, all right?
Excellent, thank you.
Okay, any more questions? Can't see any. Could we then move to the proposed new complaints report? The noise subgroup has been considering the form of the report, and they've come up with a proposed change, which I think is intended to show the information more graphically and therefore probably more easier to comprehend. I think comments on that are invited if anybody's got any comments to make. But otherwise,
just a little bit of context from our side. So I think the last couple of FACC meetings, particularly around the complaints report, where you've got 30 odd pages of Excel spreadsheet of where complainants have complained, as a start to try and, rather than have everybody read through that, have it in a more graphical representation, as Philip mentioned, and just make it more visual and hopefully more easier to understand and pick out certain trends a lot easier than what we have previously. So essentially what we're looking for is any comments or suggestions on how we would take that forward to the next FACC in November, and hopefully implement that to replace, I think it was section 8 and 9 in the actual information report.
Any comments on the new form of report? Are you happy to go ahead with that? Sorry, Chris. Yeah.
Yeah, just one to add. On slide 6 of that, we have the aircraft types. You've got a basic count of different aircraft types by complaint. What that doesn't represent very effectively is how many of those aircraft are coming in regularly, and I think perhaps a percentage of the aircraft that came in, that might be a little bit more representative. Because you can see it's 100% of that particular type of aircraft that causes our complaints, and it's a very low percentage of another type of aircraft, and I suspect there'll be a strong correlation with their noise categories, because we all know the one that generally creates a lot of fuss.
Yeah. Okay.
Good point, Jenny. Jenny Radley or
Jenny Radley, yeah.
Thank you very much. So I have some concerns. Certainly the proposed graphs, I think, give the general impact of where complaints are coming from, and maybe the skew that happens where a few people seem to be dominating the whole report. I am concerned if we lose the listed report of all the complaints, then actually we lose any understanding of what's going on in our own areas. As was pointed out to me at a recent meeting, I've been made aware that actually Rushmore Borough Council receive a quarterly report, which is very similar to the one received by the FACC currently, but it is lacking some really important information under the categories. And I think I would like to, if we're going to lose the one to the FACC, then we need to improve the one to the Rushmore Borough Council, so that at least we do have a clear listing of all the complaints, so that complainants themselves can actually see that their reports have been recorded and registered in an appropriate way. It's also useful for anyone else that's interested to go through and plough through all those numbers themselves if necessary. So we need to highlight that maybe on the FACC website. But if we can add the aircraft type, whether it's an aircraft operation, an arrival or a departure, and which runway they're using to the Rushmore list, I think that would be a bit more useful and be able to identify, certainly for the complainants making the complaint, whether that's the issue that they're picking up on. I hope that makes sense.
Okay, I'll ask Gareth to respond.
Yeah, I think what we're just trying to do, Jenny, is just slimline the process a little bit for us. I don't see it being a particularly large hurdle for us to include that in the RBC report. I'll confirm with RBC that they would be happy with those types of changes. But before I agree to anything, I think we just need to make sure that we've covered all our bases in the rest of the comments that we'll come out today, and improvements, and then just make sure that the process that we go through is beneficial to both parties, I think.
Yes, of course. Thank you very much.
Okay, any more?
David Munro.
David Munro.
Hello. Yes, thank you very much for that. We discussed this new format quite extensively in the noise subgroup, and I generally support it. I was initially agreeing with others that we really don't need the detail of every single flight that has been reported. But on reflection, I don't think actually the effort in actually producing that spreadsheet, which presumably exists anyway, but the effort of actually putting it in the noise report is all that great. And so I would probably I would recommend we keep that. I don't think it's frankly very helpful. I don't read it in detail myself, but nevertheless, those who are interested in that sort of detail, I think, should have the opportunity of doing it. So that's my pennyworth anyway.
So is everybody basically in favour of that? I mean, shall we ask Gareth to include that information? Yeah. Nobody's saying not.
James has got a question.
There's a question from James Radley.
Sorry, I was just about to sneeze. So the question was asked, do we like the new report format? And in terms of providing information, I think it's great. And so I do support the new data format. I also support people who've commented that the underlying data is also useful. For instance, there were 8 complaints from 4 people in the Church Rickham area highlighted in the report. And it would, and I can do this with the data I've currently got, but in future I'd still like to understand, what are they complaining about? Is it a particular aircraft? Is it a particular aircraft taking off or a particular aircraft landing? Was it all centered around one day? I wondered, I could then research what was the weather like. Were people having barbecues? Were windows open? Or was it a particular type of wind that was causing the issue? I'd just like to understand what it is that affects people, just so that, you know, in future I can be advocates for them in this committee. And if I don't understand what my residents are being annoyed about, then I can't do that effectively. So the information report, the new proposed one, is absolutely great because it gives information. It doesn't drown us in data. But I'd still like the ability to dig into the data too, so I can form my own picture about what my residents are concerned about. And I would trust that other people do that for other postcodes as well around the area, and, you know, for their own bit of it. Yeah, so I think I'm agreeing with all the other comments which have been made so far, so I'll shut up. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm happy to take it away, have a look at it, and things like what you've just said, James, you know, particularly down to a postcode detail of what the complainants are actually concerned about, might be beneficial to you. So let me see how easy that is to transform into that. Obviously with the smaller numbers it's a lot easier, but when we get into bigger numbers it might be a bit more difficult, but we've got some Excel whizzes around, so I'm sure we can make a plan.
Brilliant, thank you.
Chris, you got a comment?
Well, it's just come back really, and perhaps help James a little on that point. You know, we're provided with a report that is is published in PDF. Would it be easier to just publish the thing with the Excel annex, and then people can go and extract what they want from it?
There's no GDPR data in there, so, you know, I don't particularly see a difficult problem with that.
Well, you can publish it in PDF, and you can drag it into Excel. It's even got optical character recognition these days. there's plenty of ways to do that. So it just makes life easier, and then people can pull what they need.
Okay, I think the answer is yes. So Andrew Lawton.
Yes, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm representing George Hess on this. And so I just really, the first time I was looking at this postcode information, and GU10 is my local ward. It's basically Rowledge and East Farnham. And I'm fairly horrified at the total number. Now, obviously, this has been discussed with George before, but for my benefit, could you just give me some sort of overview as to why GU10 represents about 95% of the whole of the complaints? Thank you.
Thanks, Andrew. So back in 2020, there was an airspace change that got implemented in February. And so where before, and I know Rachel likes to use the word Wild West approaches, where all the aircraft sort of flew all over the space, but, obviously Alex and his team, arrived them to the airport safely. That airspace changed and now concentrated the arrival routes over Shirt. And that's where the typical hotspot is for GU10. So where before there was a larger dispersal, the routes have now been concentrated. So part of the noise aspects for aviation is to reduce the number of people overflown, and these are why some of the routes have been selected.
So are you basically saying that you're not going to reduce the problem, you're just shifting the problem from one place to another place?
Yeah.
We're not shifting anything.
Well, we're working towards government legislation of what's best to do for aviation noise.
Okay, one other question. Can you just explain what is the figures in brackets? One's 587 and one's 428.
So that was saying that one complainant complained 428 times. So the other 10 complained the other, 150 odd, 160 odd times.
Okay, well, that does give me some reassurance anyway. Thank you very much for your help.
Yeah, there are some serial complainers, Andrew. I mean, what you might like to do is to come into the airport one day and just have a chat to the guys that know all about these things, because I think that's always a worthwhile thing to do.
I'd very much like to do that. Who would be the person I can get in touch with for that?
Through you, Whit.
Probably be.
Yeah, well, normally we do the new, any new members, we welcome to have that kind of coffee and chat with us, and we can ask these things. And normally people put their names forward to Whitaker, and then Whitaker will get in touch with us and we'll organise some dates.
Thank you very much. Well, I'll do that maybe with George Hess. Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Right. Any more questions on this? So I think the broad conclusion is that we go forward with this report, with this format, and make those changes that we discussed. Next item is an overview of acoustic services by Bickerdike Allen. They are consultants to the airport company, and I think we have a representative from Bickerdike Allen to speak to us. Is that
yeah? So
correct?
We've got David Charles from Bickerdike Allen Partners. David and his team have been a part of the airport's noise information services for a very long time. A great expert in the noise realm, and so we're hoping today is going to be a real education piece around noise. So I know we touch on it a little bit later, but we know noise is filled with many different acronyms and things like that, and it can be quite tricky to understand. So hopefully David's going to give us a good overview today. Okay, David, over to you.
Well, thank you very much, and yeah, hopefully it will be an overview. See what you think. Obviously, there wasn't. It's very much an overview. Obviously, you can talk about noise not necessarily for hours, but it's an overview. So it's not about any specifics. So it's not about the application, for example, or current activity per se. It's more a general introduction to aircraft noise in particular. Fingers crossed, I can share some slides, which hopefully give you some useful information. And is that coming up by any chance?
Not as yet, Andrew, no. Sorry, David, not as yet.
Okay.
Do you want to share it on my side, David?
It's all right. I've got it's having too many windows open. Here we go. Is that coming through? Something went wrong. Technology is lovely when it works. Right.
Yes.
Right.
Yes, we've got it
Yeah.
down there. Yeah.
Good, good. Great. And so hopefully, so I can make that. Right, there we go. So we'll do that.
You've just, yeah, go
Okay,
left on the.
Oh, just click on that, yeah.
To the left, just above there, from the beginning, where it's
yeah,
top left. Yeah, there you go.
There we go. Thank you very much. Great. Right. So as somewhat introduced, so this is it's titled Acoustic Service, an overview, but it's in summary, it's an overview of acoustics. Just recap, I'm David Charles from Big Dyke Allen. Our details are there. We do a lot of work with airports, Farnborough and others, and have done for, well, many years. So why is it not going? There we go. So today it was running through, so there's an introduction and it's running through noise metrics. So noise is measured and characterized in various ways. So it's going to introduce some of the ones that are done most commonly. There's a bit about noise modeling, because obviously that's a key aspect of presenting and assessing noise. And then there's also a bit about noise measurements, some of which have been done in the vicinity of the airport and are done on a regular basis. So as an introduction, so, well, what is noise? So I think the key is basically noise is unwanted sound, is the key. So basically the air oscillates, so it's a vibration, and that is picked up by your ears, obviously, as sound. And if you don't like it, it's generally cast as noise. On frequency range, basically the human ear generally is between about 20 hertz and about 20,000 hertz. That's for that's going from a low sound, a very low rumble, to a real sort of squeaky pitch or whine. That as you get older, generally, or if you've got hearing issues, generally the higher frequencies are the ones you lose, which did lead actually years ago to they used, you may have heard something called the mosquito, which was a sort of device they put where they didn't want teenagers to hang around, and so it made this high pitch noise which older people couldn't hear, so it wasn't an issue for them, but it was annoying if you were younger. I think that was generally frowned on, taken away now. Sound is measured in decibels, so the dB unit, which you've probably seen on various things, and just to bear in mind that's a logarithmic unit as well, which has some effects in terms of how the numbers behave. How do people perceive noise? So this is where basically the human ear doesn't hear each frequency equally. So some frequencies your hearing is better at picking up. So unsurprisingly, speech frequencies are the way you're generally good, and those are somewhat towards the middle. So 500 to 2000, 4000, that kind of range in the frequency band is where you're most attuned at hearing things. Very low frequencies, you're generally not very good at pick up at all. And the A weighting, that reflects how the ear responds. So if you're measuring the noise, you'll measure the noise over a wide range, and then you'll make adjustments. Well, it makes adjustments automatically, this A weighting, to get an overall figure which reflects how someone will generally hear it. So that's the human sensitivity. And then what noise you actually hear. So at a location, obviously it depends on how much noise there was to start with, so at the source, how far away you are, that's a key thing. Soft versus hard ground, this is to do with if you've got a source near the ground in particular. If it's travelling over water or concrete or something like that, the sound will propagate better than if there's vegetation. So that's the soft and hard. Obstacles, obviously, if you put a barrier up or a building up, that will reduce sound. Weather as well, there can be effects there. So downwind propagation, for example, the sound will travel better than upwind. You can get temperature inversions and things like that as well, which in certain weather conditions, in effect, sound gets reflected back down, so it can travel further under certain weather conditions, generally sort of, it's cooler conditions and sort of start of the day, I think is often the period when that can occur. So then carrying on, you've got the issue of, what do these numbers mean? So you're going to get this decibel number. What does it mean? So it's used to compare to sort of typical experiences. They're used with government policy and guidance, and obviously research, which can feed into policy and guidance as well, as a way of characterising what your exposure is, and then you compare that to obviously what the response is. Because of this logarithmic scale that it's based on, when you're looking at changes in noise, it means that change of 1, for example, is generally imperceptible. When you get towards 3, that's where you can start to pick up changes. But then if it moves on towards 10, that's where it suddenly, hang on, this is twice as much. So it's an exponential type effect on the change. On the right there, you've got there's basically, if you search online, you'll see all sorts of barometers with all sorts of noise levels, some of which are, well, slightly questionable. The main challenge that a lot of them miss off is distances, for example. So they'll give a noise level of a source, but obviously depending on how far away it is, depends on how loud it is. This one was actually put out by the Airports Commission back in the day, and is actually, reasonably sort of complete, if like. So for a lot of the sources, it actually gives a distance, for example, and then for others, like in a quiet office, it's giving a general picture, because obviously that's just in the space. I think a good reference is someone talking like now, it's probably about 60. It's that kind of level, but obviously individuals vary. So someone could be 63, and that would be perfectly normal. There's variation because people are obviously naturally slightly different. Okay. So if you're considering an airport, there's a variety of noise sources, crudely grouped in 3 areas. So there's surface access, so primarily road traffic, and obviously that's mainly affects the people who live near the access roads or main roads where the traffic uses it. There's what's called ground noise. So this is taxiing, apron use primarily, and so that's normally people nearest to the site perimeter, because obviously the activities are limited to on the site. So again, the distance is key. Things like hangars, for example, can be very effective in terms of barriers for that. Then you've got airborne aircraft. This is the main source of noise. So this is the one due to the departures and the arrivals. Obviously extends some distance from the airport site and along the arrival departure routes. Compared to some of the other sources, which may be more sort of continuous, airborne aircraft is isolated events. So obviously you'll have a departure, and then you'll have gap, and then you'll have another one, depending on the time of the day and how busy the airport is at that time. So these are considered, and these are events, they're considered because they're going to be sort of standout events, if you like. So they're considered actually in terms of the level from the events, as opposed to how they compare to the existing environment. So it's not sort of considered that the existing environment will mitigate the noise from the events. You just take the events as they come. Noise metrics. So probably starting not necessarily on the easiest end, but the common metric that you've probably seen if you've looked at any of the correspondence and actually the noise contours for the airport is the LAEQ. So this is the EQ bit stands for equivalent. The A is the A weighting that we had before, and L is level. And so it's basically a way of totaling up the noise over a period. So you look at, rather than consider individual events, you consider multiple events. So in a day, for example, you had 26 aircraft fly over a particular area. So you add up the noise from all those 26, and you give an equivalent level for the day. And that's sort of illustrated somewhat at the bottom. So that's just an example period showing a number of events. And then it also gives an indication of where the calculated LEQ would be. So obviously there's periods where there isn't any aircraft noise, and there's periods where there is. And so the LEQ is sort of obviously between the bottom and the top. It's focused more towards the top because of the way because again, it's a logarithmic addition. So higher levels have a greater effect. So if you look at the sort of area above the line, it's smaller than the area below, which is showing it's being lifted up. Those are generally done for, they are done for daytime and nighttime. So the daytime, which is used in the planning system, is from 7 till 11, 7 in the morning to 11 at night. And then there's an equivalent night, 11 p.m. till 7 a.m. Well, obviously not an issue at Farnborough. The LEQ metric, one of the reasons it's used is because it's basically found to best correlate with response. So they've done a series of surveys, and so that's where you obviously do a survey and you carefully set that out to not lead responses, and you then look at responses for many people because individuals vary, which is one of the reasons for the complaints. Is just one of the biggest variations is between individuals. And then you compare the response at particular locations to the computed LEQ for the day or the night, if that's what you're looking at. And then you try and look at, is there a pattern, is there a sort of relationship that they can extract from that? And yeah, the LEQ's performed the best. So then one of the things it's sometimes levelled at, it's an average, but actually it's a measure of the total noise. So it's you add up all the movements, the noise from all the individual movements, and express it as a daily level. And so it's not saying that the level is constant all day. And as mentioned a minute ago, when you're doing surveys, that's surveys of people who are experiencing individual aircraft or series of aircraft events. It's not, they don't get in the room and play a steady level all day and then say, what do you think? They go mad. So it is reflecting people's response to individual events. So there's just sort of quirk. Obviously, at Farnborough, the daytime, the activity is slightly shorter than the day. So there's a period when, there's no activity, which I presume is generally seen as a benefit. So, you could produce a console for the shorter period, but that would then have the weird effect that, you'd have a metric that you couldn't compare to anything because the survey responses are not based on that. But you also have the quirk that if you then extended the hours, actually that would suggest an improvement, which I would have thought would not be sort of tied with common sense. When you're looking at then what period you consider, generally it's the summer period has been used. So that's the middle of June to the middle of September. It's a period when obviously people are outside more, windows are open more often, and also it's typically a busy period for airports. So it's generally a sort of worst case overall. Other metrics, so there's number above contours. So these were brought in intended to be easy to understand, although in practice they've got quirks. What they're doing is they're saying the number of times an aircraft produces a level of, say, 65. So an N65-10 contour, for example. So they have two parts. It's the number of times an aircraft produces a level of at least 65, well, at least 10 times. So it's where 10 aircraft events in the period produce at least 65. It doesn't tell you anything about the other aircraft other than they were always all less than 65. And similarly, it doesn't tell you about what's the noisiest one or how much above 65 the top 9 were. It just tells you in effect that the 10th one was 65 and there were 9 noisier and an unlimited number quieter. So I have to say, they're not used for assessment because there is that sort of uncertainty. They only give you some information. Whereas at least the LEQ, you add up all the noise. So if an aircraft is a lot above 65, it will add more to the LEQ than if it was only just above 65. So this is why you can get differing or unexpected changes to the end contours. For example, you have a few more movements and the end contour may not move. It may move a lot if you suddenly trigger enough to go over a threshold, or actually if the mix changes slightly, it could go down. So you've got that sort of complication. There's two others, LDEN and LNight. So these are commonly used. They stem from the EU noise mapping and they're used across the EU. They're also used in the UK as well. The LNight is very similar to LEQ 8-hour, except it's based on annual. And then the LDEN is a slightly complicated unit. It splits the 24-hour period into 3 periods, a 12-hour day, a 4-hour evening, and an 8-hour night. And then it adds penalties to the noise in 2 of the periods, the evening and the night, and then adds it back all together to get a 24-hour number. And so those are used as part of sort of EU reporting, and also there's noise action plans which relate to those as well. A couple of other metrics. So there's the LA max and the SEL. The LA max is arguably the easiest to understand. That's the highest level when the plane went over. It's nice, simple. The SEL, that's the total noise from the aircraft event. So it's considering, it's like an LEQ, but it's just for a specific event rather than for a whole series of them. LA90, you may not see, it's not generally used for aircraft. This is used if you're considering, say, fixed plant, for example. It often comes in there. So this is the underlying noise level. It's often road traffic, distant road traffic causes this. And then LA10, 18 hour, this is the sort of, well, like local road traffic. And so this is considered using when road traffic is considered. So it's looking at the highest level, but here it uses actually an 18-hour period from 6 a.m. to midnight. Noise modelling. So obviously you can't measure everywhere. And also you can't measure in the future. So modelling is a standard tool that's used. There's a number of models that commonly used for aircraft noise. So there's the integrated noise model. So this was the USA's FAA's model for many years and was used at Farnborough for many years, and actually the last application, and so the current budget were produced using this. So the model includes details of many aircraft, and you can make adjustments to those as well. And you basically put in, well, there's this, you put in the routes, you put in the number of aircraft, and it will produce a contour for you. The Aviation Environmental Design Tool is the updated version. So that's, in some ways, it's very similar to the INM model. The main thing it does now, it does a bit more in terms of air quality. So there used to be two separate pieces of software, and it brought the two together. It does all of it, so because it's the current version, includes some newer types. And actually has been used for the contours in the most recent planning application. The other one you may have heard of is Ancon. This is the CAA's model. They keep it to themselves, so you can ask them to produce a contour, but they won't give necessarily the software, so you can produce it yourself. This is primarily based on data from Heathrow Gatwick and Stansted, which is where it's primarily used. Just on the models, they're all designed to meet sort of same standards. So if you put the same answer in, you'll get a very similar answer out. So yes, inputs are somewhat covered that go into the modelling. So obviously there's location of the runways, obviously that's key, or runway. Then the details of the aircraft, so obviously it's number, type, arrival or departure, and also can be an issue of how far they were flying as well, because that affects the aircraft weight. Then you've got what the tracks were, so that can either utilise radar data, for example, or and it's got, so yeah, position, altitude, speed can be taken from that and used to generate profiles as well. Then noise levels can feed into it. So this is if an airport's got a monitoring system like Farnborough does, those obviously record individual movements, and so you can compare predictions to measured and check that the predictions are appropriate, or if not, make adjustments. And then there's weather setting in that as well. So it includes long-term weather data, which you can utilise to affect how the sound propagates through the air. The main effect of the weather, to be fair, though, is actually in terms of which runway is used. So obviously it affects which direction the aircraft go, and so which route. So that's the main effect, is the wind direction. Terrain is also another thing that can go into the model. So obviously if you're up a hill, you're generally closer to the aircraft, and so therefore the noise level will be a bit higher. Exhibit A, if you like. So here's an example of a contour. You may have seen this, but so noise contours show line of equal loudness. So and then there's sort of shading used here just to sort of colour in. So the outer one, you've got 55 to 59 is the outer one, and then there's 60 upwards is the inner one. And so the actual boundary, those are points of equal noise level. This is, the outer one is the 55 LEQ 16-hour annual day, which is the current noise budget measure. And so the current budget actually is 6.58. That contour is, I think, noticeably smaller than that. That's an actual one rather than the budget one. And just on, I suppose, shape, if you look to the right of the airport, it's relatively narrow. That's because it's mainly due to arrivals, whereas to the west, it's wider, and that's because it's mainly due to departures. So departures are higher generally as you get away, but they're producing a higher level because obviously they're climbing. The other thing you can produce rather than just contours is noise spot levels. So you can put it in representative locations or project at noise levels or at particular buildings if you want information on those. And then just on noise measurements, so there's a number of ways that this is done. So there's also the permanent fixed noise monitors, noise monitoring terminals. So there's one at each end of the runway, in effect, one at Farnham College and one at Tweedledum Racecourse. And these measure noise levels from each arrival and departure and can be used to validate the noise models. They can also be mobile monitoring, so that can obviously put a variety of locations at relatively short notice and can look into where there's community concerns, for example. And well, consultants can also assist, as well as the airport, doing monitoring, such as a recent survey in Chert. Just on how they're used. So with the NMT data at the moment, it's used to validate the contours every year. So it gets updated. It looks at the most common aircraft types. And then you compare what the default prediction is, if you like, from the type to what you actually measure. And then if you need to make any adjustments, you can make those. Ambient noise isn't generally a concern because obviously the monitors are sited where the aircraft stands out, in effect, so it's clear to measure. So you generally sight them away from a road, for example. Obviously further away, if you're looking to put a mobile monitoring, it's something you need to bear in mind. We had one site where it was at a school and you could see that the measured levels went up at break time. So obviously that's something you just need to bear in mind. I think that is what I have. So hopefully that's of some interest.
Yes, thank you very much, David. Are you willing to take questions?
Yes, yeah.
Okay. Has anybody got any questions? James Radley's got a question.
Yeah, this is a perennial one for me. I've mentioned it before and I'm going to keep mentioning it because I think it's really important. LEQ as a predictor as of the onset of noise annoyance clearly does not work for an aerodrome which has an operation pattern like Farnborough. This is empirically obvious because when you show us your 55 dB contour for Farnborough, apart from a very narrow band that sticks into Farnborough town, nobody else should be annoyed by noise from Farnborough, but they are. And the reason is, and you had it in your diagram, it's the way that LEQ is calculated. Because if I came round with a trumpet and blew a trumpet outside your house 20 times a day, the LEQ would be well below 55 dB. But you would be rightfully annoyed. And it's because the flights are irregular and infrequent. They can be much louder and therefore more disturbing, but the LEQ gets flattened because of the gap between them. So my question is, and you went through different measures, there's the N contour, there's the LA max contour, and there is the cell contour. Why are they not used to measure the impact of noise at Farnborough? Because that would be a more representative model of how aircraft from Farnborough affect residents. Why is it we stick to LEQ when it's quite clear empirically and logically that it doesn't apply here? It's great for Heathrow, it's great for Gatwick, where it deals with the background drone of aircraft, because there's a flight landing and taking off every 90 seconds. It doesn't work at Farnborough. Why do we stick to LEQ when there are better models available to us?
I wouldn't agree, I have to say. First of all, 55 isn't seen as, if you're outside the 55, no one will be annoyed. Individuals vary in their response, as highlighted by the complaints, for example. You've got an area where everyone's getting a very similar level. One person has made 400 complaints and almost nobody else has made any. So the contour isn't saying that if you're in or out, everybody is happy. It's an overall or general response. Also, 55 actually isn't used for the onset. It's 51 is the latest government guidance, is that's the lowest observed adverse effect level. But it still doesn't mean that nobody outside or inside. So it doesn't mean everyone inside will be unhappy and everybody outside won't be. The human response is bigger than that difference. So it's an overall sort of community approach as opposed to taking out individuals. On other metrics, if you just consider the L max, that only works for one type, or one event. So it doesn't allow you to allow for, well, are there more events, for example? You need some kind of way of adding up those events. The SER has the same problem. So it still comes back to when they've done studies, and they use LEQ at all, it's not just used at Heathrow or Gatwick, it's used at other airports. Farnborough's number of movements aren't, a lot less than some commercial airports, for example. So, and they're, sort of passenger airports where they're also used. And it's been found to be a good correlation, or the best correlation with human, response to surveys.
Do you want to come back on that, James, or?
My observation is it's the loud. So I live under the flight path, full disclosure. A plane will go over. If I'm on a conference call, I will have to mute my laptop so I don't deafen other people on the conference call. If I'm having a conversation with my wife, we actually pause for about 10 to 15 seconds as the plane goes over. We never complain. We never complain because there's no point. It doesn't mean we're not annoyed. Just make that point. People are annoyed by aircraft movements at Farnborough. That's a given. And I do think that the LEQ completely misses the point that it's the individual events. And you can tolerate one or two going over and you don't notice it. And eventually you get to a little threshold. Everyone's got a different threshold of how many events it takes to annoy them in a certain period of time. Once they cross that threshold, they go, there's another one of those effing planes. And it's that point at which you get annoyed. And if you have more movements, more and more people will cross that threshold. I do think we do have to look at something. Maybe the N contour is an interesting one as to how many movements over a certain loudness threshold do people experience in a day. I think and does that correlate to if people feel aggrieved or not? I think the N contour model might actually be a useful one to apply at Farnborough, just as an experiment to see, does it account for what feedback you get from complaints or objections on noise grounds when you have a planning application, for instance? Is there a better correlation to the N contour than there is to the LEQ contour? A question, philosophical one.
Well, they did test that actually with the last. It wasn't Farnborough specific, but and they found the LEQ correlated better. The two will be related because obviously they use the same inputs. The N contour is a number of events. You were mentioning about threshold and having a number that you go over. Well, the number is, if the number goes up, the LEQ goes up. So that it also follows.
Okay, Jeff, do you have any questions? You normally take a great interest in this subject.
That's why he's in the Rice Committee.
Sorry, I can't. You're not switched on.
You're muted, Jeff.
You're muted.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah. Good.
Yeah, David, I've submitted 3 questions that I think you're in the best position to answer, and I'll read them. The first is the onset of significant community noise has been reduced from 57 dB LEQ 16 hours to 54 dB LEQ 16 hours. Can we take it that the 54 dB LEQ threshold also applies when the equivalent continuing noise is evenly distributed over a shorter period of time, i.e. 12 hours?
Not necessarily, no. Because obviously if there's a short, if you're saying 54 12 hours, it's the same as 54 16. It clearly isn't.
It still represents the threshold for significant community noise.
So it's only expressed as a 16-hour value.
Why?
Because that's what the research has been done on the basis of. So the research has considered 16 basic response and expressing the noise over 16 hours. So that's what the data they used to.
But if the number, sorry to interrupt, but if the number of events that give rise to that LEQ over 16 hours, if that number of events were to be conducted within 12 hours, then the threshold it increases.
Well, it depends, because you're then avoiding. It depends. It's would you like this, if you're going to have 12 flights? Would you like them spread out over a long period or all out the way in one go? And there's not. People will have different opinions on that. I think the other thing is if you're doing the shorter period, for example, if you're losing the evening hours, the LDN metric, which briefly touched on, that actually acknowledges there's a penalty for the evening hours. So if you concentrated them to more during the day, that potentially is a benefit.
It just seems to me that the threshold will be much lower over 12 hours than it would be for 16 hours. Anyway, I'll leave that there. The second question, I'm referring to a table in the environmental assessment supporting the current planning application. And there's a table which shows that N65 contour areas reduce as the number of events increase. A simple explanation of this unexpected event would be helpful, or this relationship would be helpful.
So it's as I was mentioning with the N contours, they're not a direct link between number of events and output. So if the aircraft mix changes a bit, for example, you could actually have more movements but a smaller N65-10, because if those extra movements aren't producing 65 at that point, the number you've got producing 65 actually may reduce, although the total number may increase.
I'm not sure I understand that.
That's the problem with the N metric, I have to say. They were meant to be easy to follow, but you get these quirk results. So if you've got in Exhibit A, you've got the top 10 events produce at least 65 in scenario A, and then there's 20 other events. In scenario B, that you've only got 9 events that produce 65, but you've got 40 events that produce less than 65. So your number of events has gone up, but the number producing 65 has actually gone down. So the N65 contour will get smaller, although the number of events has gone up.
Just to interrupt a little, is that because it's driven by the underlying assumptions on what flights are actually being counted up?
Well, it's based on all the flights that's in the mix, but obviously if the mix changes, then there can be that will affect the number that are over a given level.
I wonder if we're straying into an area that really is probably better dealt with in the noise subgroup. I mean, I don't wish to close down the discussion.
Yeah, well, there's no one in the noise subgroup who can answer that question.
No, what I mean, well, possibly David should be invited. I don't know whether David would be willing.
Yeah,
to
David just provide
I'll tell you that would be extremely helpful.
Okay.
Because I don't want to have open up a big debate around what's in the planning application and why it's there. I think if there's a specific question as to that relates to how we measure noise, then we can ask David to provide a written response and see if that does the trick.
Okay.
Yeah, that would be if we can explain why there's apparent anomaly, that could be explained. That would be very helpful.
Do you know what the question is, David?
Yes, I think I'm clear.
Okay, thank you. And just for avoidance of doubt, in the planning application, we do look at N65 as well as LEQ, so we're not solely focused on LEQ.
Okay.
Can I just go to the last question then?
Okay, Jeff.
Yeah, I've referred to this superseded CAP 725, which required the production of SEL footprints for night flights, and it also says they may be relevant to daytime operations. has this advice been carried forward into CAP 1616, and would their production alongside N65 contours be beneficial?
Yes, so those two documents both relate to airspace change applications, which obviously the current application isn't. I think
that shouldn't matter, David, should it?
Well, it's do they apply? They don't. They are specifically for airspace change, but ignoring that point, because obviously a feature of airspace change is there's likely to be planes in a different location because you may well change a route. Obviously, the current application, for example, doesn't change where the aircraft fly. In fact, many of the aircraft will be exactly the same as those that operate today. So people are well aware of what noise they already make. So the SEL will give a measure of what a particular aircraft individually makes. But that information people in a way doesn't add because it's not mainly changing. So it's more about the application, more about are there more.
Right. So you're saying that SEL footprints wouldn't add anything to the N65?
Well, they're not greatly. No. I think it's because an individual footprint gives you, well, this is the total noise from a specific flight. Using a different metric to the N65, which is the peak noise occurring a certain number of times.
Yeah. Oh, okay, thanks.
But I think you'll get a written reply as well, Jeff, if that's all right. And then, as I say, the noise group could further the debate because this is a complicated area.
Yeah, it would be very helpful if I could get a written reply.
Okay, right. Any more questions for David? Nobody's in. Oh, Chris, are you indicating?
Somebody else do this.
It's me.
Richard, you want to go?
Yes, please. What can airports do to modify the noise footprint? For example, would planting under the flight path significantly reduce the takeoff noise experienced by residents downstream of the takeoff path? What are the things that people can do to modify the experienced noise?
So that's subject to a whole presentation. I would have thought that for the various sources, it depends. So ground noise, for example, that's where the aircraft is on the ground, and so that's when things like barriers, in particular, or bunding, that can be very beneficial. Once it's in the air, it's obviously more difficult to control the noise through sort of, barriers don't work, planting doesn't really do things. That's more about how you operate the aircraft, where you fly it, and then you can do things to obviously the receiving environment as well. So you can do treatment of properties, for example. But that's more, how we operate the aircraft, what the aircraft type is, for example, controlling the types that come in. And airspace can have an effect as well, because that can affect the heights that aircraft are at, which again is the distance.
Thank you.
Okay, any more questions? Not seeing any indications, no?
No further questions?
Fine. Well, thank you very much, David, for explaining a very complex subject. And as you know, we've got a noise subgroup, so I'm sure that they'll want to review your advice when they next meet. But anyway, thank you so far for contributing to the meeting. Right, I'd like to move on then to the next item, which is we're not doing item 8, we've already had that from Sophie Rogers. So the next item is 9, which is the... I
think we've got 7.
Have we got 7? Oh, sorry, yeah. Gareth is going to report on the noise subcommittee. Sorry, Gareth.
Yeah, everybody. So we're just going to have a brief run through what came out of the church monitoring report that David and his team conducted late last year. So we're just going to run through a couple of slides. So what we did once we got the report from Bickerdike, so obviously we had to be satisfied of how the trial was conducted through Bickerdike and using correct procedures, and the information that came from there, that we were able to really understand it from a perspective so that we can take it back to communities and explain it. So, we were quite satisfied with how Bickerdike presented the report. It was definitely informative for all of us on the noise subgroup committee, and obviously it will get distributed a little bit later on from WIT. So in terms of the results and the creation of them, so we did have to obviously go through some clarifications from Bickerdike to make sure that we were content with how those results were validated. And then also following into that was looking around the interpretations of those results. And as David spoke about earlier, obviously noise is quite a sensitive topic. It's an individual perception of how that noise influences yourselves. But each one or each person is sort of different. So we do believe that the report that David and his team presented to us gives a reasonable summary of what we experienced between the 30th of August and the 31st of October. So what we did at the noise subgroup committee, so we had a page turner going through each page and trying to understand or get points to raise clarification from Bickerdike to make sure that when we are able to go out to the communities to be able to explain those points succinctly to everybody. So yeah, we were quite satisfied with the report. And we were really happy with the clarity, and then obviously some of those questions that came out of it. It will build into future reports that the airport creates, like we'll speak about Church Crookham Community Centre and Ushot a little bit later. But then also just to improve, not only our understanding of the technical features of a noise report, but also going into the community as well. So as David really alluded to, being an expert, so people do entire master's degrees and PhDs in noise. So the David's explanations are probably going to be way better than myself. But one thing that he did pick up on is obviously, perception of effects is a very varied situation with people. And then also when you start taking into the frequencies of aircraft noise and age, it obviously paints quite an interesting picture of trying to understand and explain those metrics and those impacts people are feeling. So some of the four main ones that came out of the report, we've also got the LA max, which is around the maximum sound level that David alluded to. There's a nice little picture on the next slide as well. And then the SEL, where it basically combines that noise into a second time period. Obviously the NX contours, which we spoke quite a lot about recently, so that is the number of events above a 65 decibel threshold, and then the age-old LEQ contour that is used at the airport currently for all its annual contour monitoring. Obviously it looks at, probably better to go over to the next slide. So if we can take a point of looking at the graph where we've got an aircraft that doesn't fly into Farnborough Airport, just for interest's sake, the 747. So it's got a peak noise level of 98.8 decibels, and that's the A-weighted where David referred to. So that's the sort of the range where the human ear starts to perceive that noise or has that standard that hearing is measured against. Then you've got your the threshold event. So often when we are putting out microphones into various areas, you will set a threshold for that noise monitor as well as a duration. So, it can be a 67 decibel threshold, and if it goes longer than 3 seconds, you could potentially link it to an aircraft, where if it was 1 second, you'd probably say, well, it's not going to really be related to an aircraft. And then if we start looking at the LEQ piece where David explained, it's sort of the whole event spread out with all the different variations between it. So although the highest point of the noise level from that aircraft movement was 98.8, the actual LEQ over those 19 seconds was actually 90.2 decibels, so slightly lower if you're looking at it just as purely decibel metric, that's all. So in terms of the context for the church report, we had Biggerdyke put out a noise monitor that was installed in August last year till October. And during that period, we had about 6,300 movements. So that's arrivals and departures, and that's only Farnborough Airport movements. So that's not looking at the overflights to your Gatwicks, your Heathrows, your Blackbush, your smaller GA traffic that fly under Farnborough Airport's airspace and those types of things. Typically, we are strong westerlies, so we had 78% on our runway 24 and then 22% when we were on easterly, so i.e. taking off into Farnborough. So just on that little purple dot down there where my mouse pointer is, so that's where the noise monitor was located. So when we start looking at the word overflights, so on the left-hand side, so those are what 6,300 movements look like coming into Farnborough Airport for that period, where you've got your blue being departures and your red being arrivals. You can see a little green line or two in there, which is your touch and goes, which is typically your flying club who glide for half an hour, 45 minutes or something like that and come back and land in the airport. And then what is actually triggering the NMT, so what can we classify as an actual overflight? I know it's a bit difficult to see with the colouring there, but there's this large round circle down here, which looks at where the noise monitor is, and it creates a cone over that at 48.5 degrees, and then when we run the query, it will basically take out those movements that haven't passed through that cone. And there's a little bit, so of those 6,300 movements, it obviously gets reduced to what is classified as an overflight. And in the next slide, we'll talk about the correlations. So when we talk about correlation to the number of events, so of those events, we had a 93% correlation, which is really good. I think someone mentioned, I think anything above 80% was quite satisfactory, so we were quite pleased with the 93%. And then what does that mean? So of those 6,300, how many actually were classified as an overflight going through Shirt? And then you can see there, so for arrivals, we had about 1,200 arrivals, departures, we had 30, and then a total of around 1,200 movements, breaking it down into the runways 06 and 24. So on your right-hand side, so those are looking at the number of overflights, so i.e. flights that are triggering the noise monitor to classify it as an overflight. Obviously, we've got the dark blue, which is your runway 06, your light blue, which is your 06 departures, and sorry for the horrible orange and yellow. Orange is your 24 arrivals, and your yellow is your 24 departures. So when we start looking at your busiest and least busiest days, so now I'm classifying this as only as overflights, so ones that are triggering the noise monitor. So you're going to say, Gareth, well, those numbers aren't matching up to what we had at the bottom. So as you saw on the left-hand side there, we've got Monday, the 11th of September, on runway 24, we had 43 departures and 67 arrivals. So remember, these are only the events that are triggering the overflight. So for example, you'll get a split when arriving on 24 or 06, you've got a north and south split. So you could be approaching from the north, so you'd be avoiding Shirt, or you could be coming from the south, but you could be coming at a different angle that would prevent you from triggering that overflight in that overflight cone. And then similarly, on the least busy day was a Saturday on the 16th of September. We were on runway 06, where we had 40 arrivals and 40 departures. So again, so this is obviously something that we've touched on, and it is quite interesting where David mentioned that for an N65 contour, if you're sitting at 64.99, you're not going to be included in that. So sometimes it is not representative of what people will experience. But these are the number of movements experienced above that noise monitor within that cone above 65 decibels. So if we're looking at the period there, the maximum number of N65 events on those 2 dates, which I can't see from here, were 4. It's a bit of a chaotic screen. So on the left-hand side, so we've got a a graph of the starting from the bottom, the dashed line. So that's the background noise level. So when David mentioned the LA 90, so when 90% of the day, that was the level experienced. Then we've got, if you move further north, you've got the black line, which is your average LEQ, which was measured around 54 decibels. And all those little blue, light blue, dark blue, orange and yellow, those are the arrival departures on the various runways of the aircraft overflying that noise monitor and the variation of noise each aircraft produced. So there's a little bit from Alex's home base from NATS, just talking about some comparisons of noise levels, and David mentioned it as well, you know, how high aircraft are above the specific noise monitor, or if they are directly overhead or laterally displaced, whether they're arriving or departing. Those will all have impacts on the noise levels experienced above that noise monitor, and weather as well. So looking at some of the outcomes from this, Bickerdike have broken it down into a aircraft type, and what we're truly trying to show with this is that, you know, the size or the average MTOW, so the maximum takeoff weight in kilograms, does not necessarily correlate to noisier aircraft. So if we take a look at some of them, I like my Honda, so the third from the bottom, the Honda H8 420, it's 4,000 kilograms, and it's got an average of 65 decibels. What's another one to pick out? Let's go for the third from the top, the Cessna Mustang. So that's slightly lighter, but the average sound exposure level was only 68 decibels. So slightly smaller, but slightly noisier as well. But I think it comes again into that threshold of where people start to noticing those changes as well, where David would say, you know, I'm throwing David's name out a lot today, where we talk about, you know, 1 decibel is not typically perceivable, but then when you start getting to 10 decibels, it's starting to double the actual noise that someone experiences. And then you start looking at the CL35, so the Bombardier Challengers, and there's 600 as well, where they were typically noisier than other aircraft, even though looking at the weight disparities between all of them, they were typically the noisier aircraft that were coming into Farnborough Airport. So again, it's also, you know, linked to the number or the frequency of those types of aircraft that are coming into Farnborough Airport, and then we're tying it back into the number of complaints that was suggested earlier. From our side, for the next steps, it's really refining the reporting template with Bickerdike to make sure that when the reports come out, that they are, you know, really people friendly, public friendly, so that, you know, it explains it everything down to a T and people can go away with a better understanding. And again, it's just for us to understand, you know, are there sort of aircrafts that we notice that will have specifically higher noise levels associated with their operations. And then just following on from the church noise monitoring, we did deploy it into the Church Crookham Community Centre, which ended on the 2nd of April. And then we've just deployed it again through the Noise Subgroup Committee in U-Shot on the 18th of June. And what we really want from this is to create a noise map and a noise picture that we can take out to communities for the arrival departure routes associated with Farnborough Airport.
Okay. Thanks very much, Gareth. Any questions? What is the report going to be circulated?
Yeah, yes,
yeah, so we'll be getting the report. But have you got any questions for Gareth at this stage? Richard.
Hi. One of the earlier charts had the noise levels, background, the event level, and then the specific events, the dot matrix. Sorry, you understanding what chart I'm referring to?
Yes, I am. Yeah, sorry, do you want me to share my screen again?
Please, yeah. That one. Have you done an analysis on what it would take to take the top 5% of those items and get rid of them?
No, not so much. So we, like I say, we haven't really touched on those number of aircraft. So the 5 that would be in here when we're starting to look at things like the sound exposure levels, we haven't exactly correlated them to the number of movements coming into Farnborough Airport. But as far as I'm aware, like your citations are typically the most popular. Your challenges are probably top 5 as well.
Okay, so you are making an assumption there that the top noise events relate to specific aircraft types. Are there other factors involved, is my question.
Yeah, so there will be other factors like we spoke about, down here on the right-hand side, where there will be, the height will impact, the weather conditions will impact. For example, when we had it at the Church Crookham Community Centre, it was a really heavy pouring day, and you could trigger the microphone, and then when you went to listen, it was just pouring rain. So that would have an impact on the actual noise monitoring on that day as well.
But what I'm trying to get a feel for is, if you said if we stopped operating one particular aircraft type, that would take out the top 10% of these events, or if it's much more complicated than that.
I would say it's probably going to be a lot more complicated for us for that.
How do we get to a better understanding of that?
Well, I think it's relatively easy for us to understand the most prominent aircraft types coming into Farnborough Airport, but the challenge is those are through various operators, and to change a fleet of an operator is just not going to make business sense for us.
I didn't press for a specific course of action. I'm just trying to get to a point of do we understand what courses of action would actually make a significant impact on the noise experienced?
I don't think we're at that point yet, Richard. I think we need to understand why that particular aircraft type registers those types of noise levels, and is there anything we can do about it to bring those noise levels down, either through operating procedures. But over the long term, when we think about, the planning application and the potential to introduce noise levies, what type of aircraft might you need to financially persuade to start to upgrade and encourage versus those we want to discourage?
Thank you.
David, did you have a comment?
Yes, thank you
Monroe,
very much.
sorry.
Yes, I'm on the noise subgroup, and we did look at this report in great detail. Gareth, as far as I know, where we left it, we did have comments on the report, although we broadly accepted it, and it was going back for the sort of consultants to change it before it went public. Is this report, has it been changed, amended, and is it now public?
No, I think for the sense of urgency, David, I think it's best we push out that report, and then as the changes come in, we will then revise that and send that out.
I'm fine with that, but the question, I mean, to be frank, can I? I've got the report on my computer. Can I start circulating it? Because I haven't done up to now.
Yeah.
I think we have to.
Yeah, because it's going to go out with WITS-PAC anyway, David.
So it's now public information because we weren't sure. Well, that's I'm very pleased to say. And this, of course, is only the first step in hopefully a whole pattern of mobile noise stations and building up a noise pattern over the whole area. So. It's going to be quite a long-term process. But to me, what came out of the report is firstly the disproportionate effect of a particular aircraft, and Richard has covered that, and Bombardier has been covered, and so we need to. So that's when my residents ask me, well, what can we actually do to reduce noise, one of the things that's come out of this report is that we ought to stop noisy aircraft. And people have been saying this, of course, for a very long time. But here I think we have concrete evidence that it is the noisiest aircraft that we need to tackle. And the second point that came out to me was its arrivals reports of noise, especially arriving at runway 24, rather than departures. So how can we change the patterns of arrival, both laterally and in height terms, to reduce that noise? And I think those are the two lessons that I got. And so I put it to FAL. What can they do to tackle noise minimizations on both those aspects? And I do appreciate there's no easy answer.
Yeah. And David, look, the part this process is going to be iterative now. We're as a group, as a committee, we're looking, one, at the data, and then two, we're going to look at how can we influence the data to improve people's lives that live in proximity to the airport. But in my mind, this isn't about, well, let's just ban those noisy aircraft, because we're not going to do that. But what we are going to do, and what we're committed to do, is working with people to look at ways of alleviating noise, looking at mechanisms that might make a difference, operating procedures, noise levies, those types of things, encouraging operators to operate quieter aircraft. And that's the journey we're on. But we're not on a journey of saying, well, those aircraft are the noisiest, let's ban them. That's not something we would do.
Yeah, could I come back on that?
Yeah.
And Simon, I absolutely agree. As a supporter of the existence of Farnborough Airport, it's unrealistic just to wave a magic wand and say no more noisy aircraft. I absolutely agree with that approach, and it's a very difficult approach, and one which I think many residents who are really affected by noise, especially over high areas such as Church, which we're talking about here, and of course closer to the airport, and they might be very frustrated, as indeed I am. But what I think would be really reassuring is to give more reassurance that this process is actually starting and is being created with some urgency, recognising the complexities, recognising the timescales, but let's really start, based on the more data that we're getting, is what can we actually do, particularly on those two aspects that have been mentioned. Can we have some assurance, timescales, progress reports, etc., that this work is happening?
Yeah, we're on that journey, David. I'm not going to commit to specific timescales and outputs. We're very much starting to look at the data and get a grip as to where the issues lie, and then we can work up possible options for trying to mitigate the noise that is causing most alarm to people that experience it.
I mean, it would seem to me, David, that the work is being started. I think we've got some initial useful results, but there are further monitoring to do, and as we've heard, there's going to be monitoring at USHOT, and there's now the results of the Church Crookham monitor. So we'll be getting more information, but I think you need to get that more information before you start thinking about making decisions. And I'd also make the point, I think, that all these aircraft are actually operating legally. They're all Chapter 3 or Chapter 4, I think.
Four.
They're all Chapter 4. At least. I mean, this airport did not stopped handling aircraft which were below. Don't ask me what Chapter 4 is, but it's all to do with, the noise footprints. They don't handle basically noisy aircraft under the Chapter system. So the progress is being made, but I mean, I think it's got to be a proper structured process before you start thinking about anything else.
But can I don't want to hold thing. I fully accept that the vast majority, if not all, of the complaints are for compliant aircraft. But I'm just not getting the sense of urgency that I think is needed, while recognising is that it's got to be a structured, data-driven approach. That's fine. We're almost there. I'm almost agreeing with you, but not quite. Whereas many of people who are really annoyed about aircraft noise, rightly in my opinion, they're way apart. So let's really get cracking on this now. And I look to future noise subcommittee meetings, and indeed this meeting, to demonstrate some progress.
Okay, well, I think that is accepted, David.
I'm the fifth now.
It's easy for me to say this because this is my last meeting. But I think it's accepted that, yes, this is a very key issue that has to be progressed and pursued through this committee and through the subcommittee.
Can I add?
Yes, sorry, Jeff. Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say I fully support what David is saying. I think it's crucial that we show that we are taking advantage of the data that we're collecting. And it seems to me that this is a key matter for the noise subcommittee, and the noise subcommittee's work would be made a lot easier if it were to include a member of NATS, because it's the way the airspace is utilised that is key to all of this, and it's NATS who determine that the way it's flown, where it's used. So can I get people to consider co-opting NATS onto the noise subcommittee?
So I sit in this.
One of the ways of mitigating the issues that church residents are suffering is to consider alternative routes so that there is some respite. And that's a question that I've tabled anyway under members' questions, and I'm sure that Rachel will come back on later.
I'll come back on it now, Jeff. That alternative routes means airspace change. We are already involved in a future airspace change, and I give you an update on that at every meeting. You won't get any alternative routes ahead of that airspace change.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, I've referred to CAP 2091, Rachel.
You did, yes.
Where the clearly say there are some changes in the way airspace is used that does not involve the airspace change procedure.
There are ways you can use it, but you mentioned alternative routes just now, and alternative routes can only be used through an airspace change because we do not have alternative routes. We have one route in from the south and one route in from the north, for instance.
Yeah, I hear what you say, Rachel, but I just invite you to look at CAP 2091 and the fact that it states clearly that it's for the airspace ATCs who must trigger these changes.
Incorrect.
So I'm asking.
Incorrect. It does not say that, Jeff. It says that an airspace change can be triggered by a sponsor who is normally an airport or an ANSP. In fact, if you wanted to do an airspace change, Jeff, you could sponsor one. That is allowed. And that is all explained in CAP 1616.
It's all I'm asking for is that the initiative for changing routes comes from the service providers.
No, it doesn't. I just explained it can come if an airport owns its routes. If an airport wants to change its routes, like we did in 2020, and we are doing under our FACC South ACP, then we as the airport have that responsibility to do it. And we work with our air navigation service provider and the regulator and any other airport we might affect and our operators to achieve that.
It says, Rachel, that any change in routes can only be triggered by an air navigation service provider. That's NURL and ATC. All I'm asking for is some advice from ATC as whether or not there is the potential for changes to the existing routes.
NERL are responsible for routes above 7,000 feet, just as the airport is responsible for routes below 7,000 feet.
Yeah.
Okay. Any change to those published routes have to go through an ACP.
Yeah, I accept that at the end of the day, the CAA has to approve those routes that are proposed by ATC, but it doesn't stop ATC saying what opportunities might exist for changes. And that's all I'm asking for. What opportunities, if any, exist? If there are no opportunities that are existing, then how are the benefits the new airspace proposal going to accrue?
So those benefits will be shown in our stage 2 submission. In our initial options appraisal, you will be able to see where benefits accrue for the options that we are considering for our future airspace change. Okay. That's only up to 7,000 feet. And obviously then there's another bit that NERL is involved in above 7,000 feet.
Do any of the options that you are proposing in this current airspace change proposal involve different PBN routes?
They all involve different PBN routes.
Significantly. Okay, so potentially then there is an opportunity to have respite for the people who live in Churt.
No, I didn't say that, Jeff. When we did our design principles, we considered respite and we took the feedback that came back from our stage 1 design principle work, which is all published on the CAA's website, and design principles 6C and 6D reflect that we do not, if we can possibly do it, want the same people overflown by our arrival routes and our departure routes, for instance. Or if we can do it, we don't want other airports to fly over the same people as Farnborough's routes fly over. That is the only reference we have to specifically sharing airspace in our design principles, which were agreed with our targeted stakeholders, of which you and every member of the FACC are part of. And that was agreed, and the CA's accepted it, and those are the design principles we are working to.
Okay, I'd like to, the next noise subcommittee, perhaps we could revisit this.
You can't revisit the design principles, they are what they are for that airspace change.
Okay, Jeff, it sounds as though you should be pursuing this in that forum, really, because I think a lot of...
I should be. I think my point is pretty straightforward. All I'm asking for is there any, will there be any opportunity through the airspace change process, if necessary, for alternative routes in order to provide respite for the people in Churt?
I've answered that.
I think we've covered that.
And the answer to that is I'm not quite sure.
But that's correct at the moment, because our options are still options. We're still going through the process.
Well, that's
entirely right that we don't know, but respite is not one of our design principles that we will be assessing routes against.
And why not?
Because during stage 1, none of the feedback wanted it enough for it to become one of the design principles. You have to look at you go back and look at all the documentation on the CAA website, it's all there.
I'll leave it there. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Jeff. Any more questions? Can't see anybody indicating. Okay. Well, thanks again, and thanks, Gareth. And you'll be having another noise meeting shortly?
1 month before, so October.
Okay, in October.
Can we just talk, before that report goes public, can we just align collectively what, because David was saying, can I circulate the reports? No?
Yeah.
Can we just, is that the intention? Send this report out?
Well, at the last subgroup, there was a couple of changes that the group made. We are then going to send it back to Vicky Dye to edit that, and that's still in the process. But if there's a consensus that they'd like to see the raw report,
is it a fundamental change? Should we just wait for it?
There's a couple of changes, but
like any code.
we've previously had accusations of the time it's taken to do this and turn this around, because Piccadite have been, involved in flight path, and the one company doing a multitude of functions to us. So, we were trying to speed this process up. I think the question we'll have to take away to Piccadite is how quickly could they turn this around.
Yeah, we'd like to. If you're going to issue a report, it should be final. So, David, if we can just do that with great gusto, so that you're not waiting too long. Please allow us that moment. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm happy with that.
Yeah. Okay.
I want to play by the rules, provided the rule, provided, and I don't leak, and I won't. But let's get a move on and get that report fit for public circulation.
All right, thank you.
I think the airport's got the message, David. Fine. So that takes us to Joanne, I think.
Yeah.
And Joanne is going to discuss the public consultation and planning submission process. So Joanne.
No. Hi, for those that don't know, because I think there's some new faces on there, I'm Joanne Franco. I'm head of flight path, so I'm leading the planning application for Farnborough Airport. We started this process, and let me just bear with me a second, and I'll do a little bit of a recap for the benefit of those people that might not be aware, and then I'll give you the update through. We started the process by submitting an application to Rushmore Council in November 24. That was then consulted upon by Rushmore in the community to people's residences and to statutory consultees. And through that process, some questions fell out of that, as they should naturally. And those questions came to us in January of this year. There's quite a few. And you might ask, well, what kind of questions do you get, and why was there not that level of detail in the first place? Well, you never know what people's interests are going to be. So some people asked for more analysis in certain places, or more data against surveys that we've done, for example, surface access, some more evidence, certainly some more information on noise. Thank you, David. He's very popular today. And some clarity, some more reports. And then there's also, you get, I don't know how familiar people are with the process, but you do get responses from statutory consultees. So that could be Hampshire County Council, or Surrey County Council, whoever the statutory consultees are. There's a great big list of them. And they will ask questions and we respond to them, and that becomes a bit of a process. So when they all come back, we'll respond, and then we will submit another response to that. We're kind of close to doing it. We're just the last few bits to tweak there. And then once Rushmore have all that information, they will go back, because this is new information, they will go back out to consultation again. That will be another minimum of 30-day consultation period. And then that will go to the committee for decision sometime later this year. Now that consultation process, just to pull that out a little bit, Rushmore will go out the same as they did before, and to the extended area that they went to before, which is more than is recommended. I think they went out to addresses, please don't quote me exactly on this, but it's on their website for absolute certainty, but to area covering up to 7,000 feet based on some previous work that had been done in other areas and consultations. And then they will get the feedback from that consultation, consider it as they should, ask more questions if they need to, and we go through that process again, and prepare a report, and then that's the report that goes to the committee members, and they will make that decision. Expecting that to be somewhere around October or so this year. There's not much more to tell than that. It sounds a bit repetitive to the last update I gave but it's just quite a lot of detail to work through with Rushmore and the other consultees.
Okay, thanks, Joanne. Probably not really appropriate for any questions, but if anybody wants to raise any points
on process,
do so. Yeah, on what's the process of getting the approval or seeking the approval, not getting it, but seeking it. So I think, unless anybody's got any point to raise, we'll move on. Okay. Oh, Jeff, have you got something?
No.
Okay. Right. Next item is airspace update and air show details. I'm passing over to Les Freer and Rachel Thomas on that.
I'll do it without slides.
You can, I got them.
How we do for time? Do you want the short version or the long version, Chair?
Well, how long is it likely to take in the long version?
It could be 5 minutes. I mean, there's not too much messaging in. It's for sort of.
Sorry, you're talking about the air show or the?
We'll do the air show first.
Okay.
Because we've got the slide deck there. Yeah, it's a little bit of a joint presentation with ourselves and Farmer International. The Farmer International team, as you can imagine, 2 Explore Air Show are quite engaged in activities. So we're going to just cover some of what we need to say and some of what they need to say. But as usual, we go, the validation week and show week, 2 distinct weeks. Validation week being where aircraft that are going to display will fly in, do what they're going to do, get validated by the flying display director, and then show week is where they basically show their wares and do the displays that they've displayed on. 75th anniversary this year, so Farmer International are looking to put on a really good event. They're really pleased with progress so far, and the same six themes are in place this year than what were in last year, in terms of flight, future flight, defence, sustainability, workforce, innovation and space. So there's various halls that are turned over to all 6 of those areas, so people can go in and have a look around whatever they want to have a look around in between the display activities. So obviously air show is all about safety. We have to make things as safe as we possibly can from an aerodrome perspective and from a Farmer International exhibition perspective. So myself, Alex from ATC and Fire Service have got key roles in making sure we deliver a safe airfield for the air show activities. We have what's called a service agreement with Farmer International where they tell us what they need and then we put that on for them, making sure that it's safe and compliant with all various regulations. Farmer International appoint what's called a flying display director, who's then responsible for all display activities during show week, overseen by ourselves and a few other various regulatory agencies. Farmer International have to produce all the documentation you see on the bottom in terms of airshow safety plan, fire safety plan, health and safety, security, traffic management. Aircraft regulations is a joint one with ourselves and ATC, which explains what they can and can't do when they're up in the sky. And the whole thing is risk assessed, and it's obviously ultimately approved by a lot of agencies, but it's also approved by Rushmore Borough Council and the CAA, just to name 2. That process is well underway. All the safety manuals were approved 2 days ago, so we are in a good place, and Farmer International are in the process of submitting final approval to the CAA for the permit for the air show. I won't go into too much of this, just really bottom right hand corner, if you click on that link, we'll send this around in the minutes, it will give you all the local traffic information and plans for the air show. There's a series of road closures, street closures, area closures, it's all on there, effective from the 15th to the 26th, Trenchard Way, which is the road that runs in front of the Aviator Hotel. That's closed, so you can't get in there. There's other roads to the south in the Harts area that are closed as well for display activities, which are closed. That's come about from the Shoreham events where we have to extend that cordon for flying display activities. So they'll come out with the slides. If you click on that link below, it takes you to the Farmer International website, and there's a whole host of other traffic information as well. So that's just another map. Obviously you can see if the mouse works, airport just up there, just above the mouse. So to the south of the airport on the MOD land, that's what we call Area A, and that is kept as free from the public and road traffic as we humanly can, because there are safe zones where aircraft have to come down if they should get into trouble. As we say, validation week and show week split into two. Validation week slightly more complicated for myself and Alex from air traffic, because we have to fit in validating aircraft into the normal business aviation traffic. So that, it's not easy to do. We don't take that lightly. Quite complex. Whereas in show week, we're a regulated licensed airport up to midday, and then we hand the airfield over to the Farnborough International Airshow people, and then for the next 4.5 hours we're effectively an unregulated airfield for the display purposes, although that doesn't go for NATS, because NATS still have to run it as a licensed airfield. And then at 4:30-ish it's handed back to us, business as usual, do the usual inspections, and then we carry on with the day and then do the same the next day and the next day. So distinct operations, distinct weeks, both give their different challenges for us. Displaying aircraft, it's the one slide I probably can't see because I'm blind as a bat, but we'll send the slides over. But we have got a good sprinkling of military aircraft, 4 fast jets coming in each day. Most of them are flying, doing flying through, they're not landing. Most of that is because they're coming from various battle groups that are deployed around sort of Europe and Ukraine way, and they're sort of flying in, refueling and flying over. Whereas last year, I think 2 years ago, some of these aircraft came from battle groups that are in the North Sea, so they could come in and spend a bit of time in. Slightly different global impact this year. So, but we got a good array. It's been opened by the Red Arrows, closely followed by the parachute Red Devils shortly after 10 o'clock. So Arrows will fly over, clear the airspace, Red Devils will jump out. The big Unijacks that you probably saw on the D-Day celebrations, so they'll come down with that huge, great big flag, and then it opens at 12 for display activities. So yeah, all good, should be good. Security, quite key. Just Stop Oil have, gone public with the fact they can have a summer of chaos. We're not saying it's going to come to the air show, but we have prepared with all the emergency services, including the police, for that eventuality. We do believe we're quite a high risk target, and when I say we, I mean the air show, not the airport. We just happen to be here. Now the police, as you're probably aware, do have new powers to deal with protesters, so we've been briefed on what they are, and obviously the police will deploy what they need to deploy in line with the situation they're faced with. So I won't say any more than that, but just to be aware, it is a big risk on our risk register that we are prepared to deal with should we have to deal with it. And ultimately, that is a very quick overview of what we're doing. So if there's any questions, if not, I'll hand over to Rachel. If you think of any questions, ask them at the end of Rachel's update on airspace.
Yeah, here's mine. There we go. So firstly, a quick update on the PIR. Unfortunately, I still don't know when we're going to get the response from the CAA, so there's no good news necessarily. However, you should know that the CAA were doing their reading of our report, obviously with some great level of detail, of which that is a good thing, and they spotted a typo in a table, which then meant that the conclusion that that table supported was partially incorrect. So it was necessary to go away and find some other supporting evidence to support differently the conclusion that we had reached, and that was actually quite a useful task in itself, because that information managed to provide extra detail on how controllers actually utilise small portions of airspace like CTA7 that we have down to the south there. So although, yes, a typo is not the best thing that we would have wanted, actually the result of it, the evidence that we've got, is quite good, and everybody can see that new annex. As I say up there, it was published on the CAA website for the Farnborough airspace change of 2020 on the 10th of May. And my computer is now decided to stop. Come on, there we go. We're there now, good. Right, oh, no, yes. Come on. Oh. There we go. Oh, maybe not.
Maybe press it a few too many.
Thinking too fast.
Yeah.
All back to action.
Oh, hang on. I can just talk it anyway, so that's fine.
This is your fuzzy thing, is it?
Yes, which has disappeared. Don't worry about that. I'll send the slides out to Whit afterwards. So,
Rachel, do you want to stop sharing while you're sorting that out?
Yes, thank you. There we go. That's better. So for FACC South, the general election being called has had a bit of an impact on the general work that is being undertaken. So you will remember that we talked last time about the single design entity that the CAA and the DFT were championing for airspace changes. That work has stopped, so the consultation that was planned for this time of the year is not taking place. We await to see what will happen with the development of the SDE after the result of the general election. Not hampered by the election has been Heathrow's work to resubmit their stage 2 documentation to the CAA, and that is all on track, which is good news. So hopefully this time they will be able to progress through stage 2. Fingers are crossed for that one. The iteration of the master plan, so iteration 3 of the master plan, which is necessary before any airport undertakes any public consultation on an ACP to do with modernisation. Scottish and London Airspace South, which is Gatwick and Knurl, both are expecting to consult either the end of this year or the beginning of next year. That work has stalled a bit because of the calling of the general election, because the iteration 3 of the master plan was supposed to go and be signed off by ministers just in the timescale when the election was called. So they're trying to do a bit of a workaround with the CAA to ensure that the timescales aren't impacted and that the public consultations can take place as planned. So we just wait and hope that that can happen. So just a reminder for everybody that the London Airspace South is a Gatwick-based change, and routes above 7,000 feet are impacted above us. So it's worth everybody taking note of that one when it comes round. Specifically for our FACC South work, we've completed our additional round of engagement that we did in stage 2, which was due to feedback that people requested some more information. So we provided another set of slides with much improved graphical pictures, information to help understanding, and we provided drop-in sessions should any of the 300 and odd stakeholders that we had targeted want to ask us any questions, and we had 7 stakeholder representatives groups ask us questions in those drop-in sessions. So we're very pleased with how that went. No new options came out of that. It was just questions on clarification normally. And so now we are doing a full design principles evaluation when we look at all our options against our design principles and mark them against that, and then our initial options appraisal. So we're on track to make our submission gateway to the CAA. Submission is September, gateways in October, and we are on track to achieve that.
Okay, thanks, Rachel.
No worries.
Any questions for Rachel on these exercises? No, I don't think anybody is indicating. Okay, so we've got members' questions. I think we had 2, but they've been answered, haven't they?
I think, well, and they will be sent out.
So there were 2 questions from Jeff Marks, but we did discuss
that. They've already been addressed.
Yes, so there'll be a reply, I think a written response as well, Jeff, on that. And there are no other questions.
No.
And no matters raised by the committee. So I think that's the end of the meeting, isn't it?
A new committee date.
Oh yes, I think it's been necessary to change the date of the next meeting and it's now the 21st of November, a week later than it was originally planned. So that's the next occasion, but I won't be seeing you there. So thank you very much for everybody that's supported me during my long time as chairman of this committee, nearly 20 years, I think. And I wish you well for the future.
So before you close the meeting, Phil, I would just like to say on behalf of all the committee and all the membership for thanking you for your dedication and commitment to the cause. You've done a fantastic job over the years. I'm going to propose that we hold a small reception for you before Christmas at the Aviator Hotel, number 2 in the UK.
As you mentioned earlier.
Yeah. So we can all convene and thank you for your hard work at that moment. So we'll get a date together and do it properly and thank you for your commitment and loyalty to the airport and the community. Thank you.
Very kind.
I think Rod wants to say.
Yeah, actually, Simon Wells said you've actually stolen my thunder. I too would like to express my gratitude to you, Phil. You've put a lot of hard work in from the time that I've been on this committee, and I really do wish you all the best in whatever you choose to do next, and hope that you're not a stranger.
Thanks very much, Rob. James?
Well, to echo everything that's been said, I think you've been a very fair chairman, Phil. It's not always been easy because there's been quite a few contentious issues in our time, but I think you've handled things very fairly, giving all sides of an argument the chance to ask their questions, offer their opinions. You've done it in a very congenial way, carried people with you who will be sorry to see you go, and the new guy's got a hard act to follow.
Thanks very much, Jack.
I'd like to echo all those sentiments, Philip, and all the very best for the future.
Thanks very much, Jeff. And please
me too, from David.
Please give Colin Flack your full support. I think you'll find him a very, very good chairman.
We've got someone else who's a hand up.
Somebody else. Who's that?
I think it's still James.
Is that Jenny? It was James.
James,
Still James.
Okay.
I haven't taken it down, have I? There you go.
Okay. Thanks again.
So thanks, Phil. Are we closing the meeting?
Okay.
Close.